Hello and welcome to Community Clubs Victoria podcast. I'm John Deeks and joined today by Patrick Martin from Lighthouse Safety and Compliance. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
What inspired you, Patrick, to get involved in safety and compliance?
Well, I sort of fell into the industry. I was working with another company doing health and safety, and we had some hospitality clients. That company eventually got sold, so I started my own company, Lighthouse Safety and Compliance, 10 years ago now. And I'd worked with clubs before, and they're just a fantastic place to work. Clubs are great, people are great, the management and the staff, and there's so many nice clubs around in great locations like on the coast in Queensland and all sorts of interesting locations.
Now, what is the difference for you between CCV clubs and others?
I think it's just the people are good. I think it's the people, actually. That's what I would say. I've made a lot of good friends. I know a lot of general managers and CEOs that are just great to work with and pretty much have a good understanding. I think it's a club thing.
It's all about the community because it's a not-for-profit, so it all goes back.
A fantastic place to work.
Lead us through what it is you do and how Lighthouse Safety and Compliance helps our CCV members.
Yeah, no dramas. I only work with clubs and we do safety and compliance for clubs. So basically what we do is, in a nutshell, we go into a venue, we'll audit them, see how compliant they are, and then help them get compliant in a nutshell. And we like to think we sort of shoulder some of the burden of all the regulation and compliance that clubs have to face.
What are some of the most obvious problems that you see when you walk into a club that perhaps clubs have overlooked or whatever?
It's not so much what you see in the public area. Those areas are usually quite tidy, but it's really what's happening back of house. It's really the biggest pitfalls are how you manage your staff and what jobs are they doing and are they doing them safely. That's like a big part of the health and safety around how you manage your staff at a club.
What are the common safety challenges that you find within the community clubs?
Yeah. So some of the safety challenges is usually around having the time to spend to get on top of your safety and compliance. So much regulation in clubs. I see a lot of managers in smaller venues. They're sort of spread pretty thin. So some of them are still hands-on, working behind the bar and might be working in the kitchen, or they're changing beer kegs or beer lines or whatever they're doing. And then they're trying to get on top of health and safety and the fire safety and the other compliance, liquor or smoking or gambling. So that's definitely a challenge in the club space. The other challenge, obviously, is just there's so much regulation in clubs. Clubs are very heavily regulated. So that's sort of where we come in and try and find out for them what they need to get compliant with and try and get them compliant.
What specific regulations are at the sort of the top five the clubs need to be aware of?
Well, in health and safety, it's so broad. You've got first aid, you've got fire safety, you've got electrical compliance, you've got the risk assessments, there's training, you've got equipment maintenance like in golf clubs or bowls clubs, the tractors or the moles that they might be using. You've got courtesy buses, that's just your safety. We do spend a lot of time also on things like AML-CTF compliance with AUSTRAC, which is your anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. So that's been a big area of our focus in the last year. New South Wales has had a lot of update of their code of practice for gaming. So we've been spending a bit of time on that, which usually flows through over the border. I'm sure Victoria will be getting a bit more of that soon.
Patrick, when you go into a club, how do you conduct an effective risk assessment?
An effective risk assessment. Okay, so you have to look at the tasks that your staff do. So basically writing a list of every job that they do, which might be changing deep fry oil or changing beer kegs or beer line cleaning. So you're assessing like what are the hazardous jobs that they're doing. Then you have to do a risk assessment. Go, well, how can someone hurt themselves doing these jobs? Once you determine that, then you go, right, we need to put control measures in place, which might be we're going to swap out this with a less hazardous chemical, or we're going to make sure they wear PPE, or we're going to change the process. Once those control measures are identified, that's when you're at the right spot. You're going to need to write them down, and then you make sure that all your staff have been signed off on those safe work practices effectively. In a nutshell, that's how you do a risk assessment.
Do you have ongoing training programs at Lighthouse Safety?
Oh, yeah, we do training. We do a bit of training. We've got some online training, but we've also do a bit of face-to-face training if needed, but it will be around hospitality safety and kitchen safety, robbery, bullying and harassment, which has been an emerging topic to be compliant with over the last year.
Patrick, how do you handle bullying and unruly patrons?
Yes, okay, so number one, you need to have a policy. How does your venue manage bullying from staff? And also, how do they manage harassment from patrons? Part of that usually includes training, like awareness of what bullying is, then how to react to it, but then going into how staff might be harassed by patrons It's important to sort of teach them a few personal safety skills around sort of unruly patrons. So part of our training videos that we actually have a section that says how to deal with difficult customers. And that really it goes through a few things, but it's based around how you communicate, your body language, keeping a safe distance, looking for assistance from other management or security as needed. Every policy for every venue would be a little bit different for how they manage it because their level of risk is different. There's a venue in the city that's open late might be a little bit more unruly than maybe like a bowls club in the suburbs.
CCV clubs run on not only terrific staff, but a lot of volunteers. Now, that's a slippery slope if you're bringing in volunteers. What things are put in place to make sure the volunteers are doing the right thing as well, Patrick?
Yeah, well, the biggest risk with volunteers is when they are at usually bowls clubs or golf clubs or sometimes footy clubs. It's when they're outside helping sort of maintain the greens. You sort of have to treat them the same as you treat staff. First of all, you want to make sure they're onboarded and they're trained in whatever they're doing. So if you just want them to do certain tasks, which is what I tend to suggest to clubs, is like you want them to maybe just use these tools, these hand tools, and maybe use a buggy or a cart to get around. Then you make sure that they've been signed off and trained on how to use them, which includes what PPE to wear and where you're allowed to go and ladders if they're using them, how high they're allowed to go and that sort of thing. And then making sure they're signed off. And then you've got some sort of parameters around what volunteers can do.
I'm over 70 and I'm not supposed to be up any ladders. And a lot
No, I generally say don't give them ladders is my number one rule. You just want to make sure you're looking at what they do and making sure they're not going to do too much. As helpful as they can be, there is a liability to venues.
Oh, I can do that. I've been doing it all my life, you know. No, well, actually, Bill, don't do that because it's going to negate our insurance policy.
Just as you're talking now, a few things come to mind about volunteers that have been up on roofs, fixing the roofs because it saves the club money and the roof has collapsed or they've fallen off. There's been volunteers that have taken buggies off golf courses and driven into trees. And, there's a list of things. So you really have to have an awareness of what they're doing and then giving them pretty much a clear direction of this is where you're allowed to operate and you're allowed to do these things.
Do you liaise with insurance companies? Does that happen?
Yes, yes. So we usually get contacted by insurance companies if they've come across a client that needs insurance, but they don't have any systems in place.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes either the venue will contact us on behalf of their insurance or the insurance will just call us directly because they've heard about us and they'll say, look, this venue wants insurance, but they don't have any systems. Can you go and help them out?
Right.
Our process would usually be then we'll do an audit, we'll see how bad or good they are, and then we'll put some systems in place. Well, that'll help them get insurance, but hopefully lower their premium.
Have you got any success stories for community clubs that have improved their safety compliance?
Thing about safety and compliance, when nothing's gone wrong, it's all good. That's all going well because you haven't had an incident. But when it really goes bad is when you've had an incident or the regulator comes out to investigate. So a success story is really, and we've had a few this has happened to, is when the Safe Work Victoria comes out to a venue for whatever, a complaint, an investigation, or they might just be doing a random stop-in. It's great when the venue can say, yeah, look, here's our training, here's our risk assessments, here's our safe work procedures, here's our completed training registers, we do monthly safety inspections, and here's all our incidents recorded and closed out. That's the success story that really every venue wants to have, because when they get sued or something like that, the insurance often requests those documents. And then if there's an incident and a Safe Work Victoria investigator is coming out, they always ask for those documents. So we've had a few incidents where there's been either a complaint or whatever. They've come out to investigate, and when they can look through all those documents, the venue can demonstrate that they're taking safety seriously. That's your best chance of protecting your venue, is when you can get the investigator on side. They can see that you've got all these good things in place and you're demonstrating that you're not being dismissive of your obligations.
Quite right, because looking after staff is number one, and then they can look after customers. What are some of the trends you see emerging? I mean, safety compliance and community clubs, it's always changing. It doesn't stand still, and we've spoken about human resources. What else?
Well, safety is always going to be there, and it's only going to get more regulated. The safety's been around for a bit, so I think clubs becoming a bit more aware of the safety obligations. Increasing in the last year, I'd say we've been spending a lot more time with AUSTRAC compliance, with your AML-CTF, which is your money laundering, counter-terrorism finance. That's an area that we've been spending a lot more time on, and I think AUSTRAC's just going to continue to increase their scrutiny of venues. Responsible conduct of gambling has been an area that's sort of been increasing as well, and I think that's going to see a little bit more scrutiny in that area as well.
Cover a broad church, don't you, Patrick Martin?
there's a few things going on in clubs. Yeah.
How do you keep up with it?
We've got to have a team. See, some of my staff are really good at compliance. Some of them are great at safety. One of them really good at food safety. And then, we just have a great system where we might be at 3 different clubs. A couple of months ago, I had someone in Mackay, someone in Brisbane, someone in Newcastle, and I was in Sydney.
What other things should clients be looking out for when it comes to compliance?
Compliance is always a growing area, and there's always some new regulations or updates coming through. So just being aware of what's coming through. A few people sign up to Safe Work Victoria websites is handy, but there's a few areas that we've seen emerging, such as AUSTRAC, their scrutiny in the AML/CTF space.
Yeah.
Responsible conduct of gambling has been an area that's been growing in other states, and I expect it to go over the border into Victoria soon.
If one of our CCV member clubs want to contact you or have a question, apart from going through CCV, can they contact you directly at Lighthouse Safety and Compliance?
Yes, they can contact me directly. My mobile's on the website, so I'll be answering, or they can send me an email, patrick@lighthousesafety.com.au. Yeah, we're usually pretty quick to get back to you.
Are there any takeaways you'd like to give the clubs and the managers who are listening right now?
I guess in relation to health and safety, the most important thing that you really should have in place is make sure you've done a list of all the hazardous jobs at your venue, assess the risks and put some control measures in place, and then put training registers in place. If you're ever investigated by a regulator, that's what they look for. So that's my recommendation.
Patrick, I really appreciate you giving up your time today, and I wish you well, and thank you very much for not only looking after the clubs, but also for looking after the employees and for us patrons.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thanks.
Well, our thanks to Patrick Martin from Lighthouse Safety and Compliance for joining us today. I hope you found that informative. I certainly did. And to learn more about how CCV is working for you and your club, please visit ccv.net.au. And I'll hope you join me again next time for our next CCV podcast.